welcome to everyone who has joined us today. We're delighted to host this morning's webinar on how to lead great hybrid teams. I'm Evelyn Zauchner, co-founder of Signature Recruitment and director of our London office. I would usually have Sharon Allred with me, but as some of you might know, she's on maternity leave at the moment. She is my fellow co-founder, and the Bristol office is currently being looked after by Victoria Walker. With all of us gradually returning back to the office, some more days than others, we're all adjusting to the new now and are still learning to navigate the changes that are coming. Flexible working isn't really a new concept, but whereas previously it might have been some of the team working the odd day at home or doing flexi time in the office, we're actually now looking at whole teams and sometimes whole organizations working hybrid. So we're really looking at what we can all do to ensure that our teams stay productive and successful. On this note, I'm delighted to introduce Jo. Jo, throughout her career, has facilitated and worked with a range of teams from senior leaders, line managers to frontline staff on the delivery of a number of people-focused people projects, so business-focused people project. Jo is a fellow of the CIPD and a qualified executive coach. Her experience and expertise covers recruitment, resourcing and selection, diversity and inclusion awareness, as well as working with leaders to inspire and motivate teams to achieve their full potential. Jo will share her knowledge and thoughts about the importance of leading and being part of a team in this increasing hybrid workplace over the next 30 minutes. There is a Q&A afterwards, so we are hoping to stay within the 40 to 45 minutes as a total time for the webinar. If you have any Q&As, feel free to put them at the bottom on your screen, and then Jo will try to basically answer as many of those questions at the end of the webinar. We hope this will give you some useful tips and pointers to consider when working with your own teams, and I'll hand you over to Jo now.
Thank you for that introduction. Thank you ever so much. And I'm hoping people are able to see the screen and the slideshow as we progress this, the PowerPoint as we go through this. So I'm going to keep this kind of reasonably paced as we go through. There's a lot of information for us to cover today. I'm hoping to give you some ideas, maybe confirm thoughts and thinking that you've already got. Maybe give you some new ideas to think about or new prompts, suggestions that you can take away from today in terms of working with your team in this, as Evelyn says, this kind of new normal, whatever the phrase is going to end up being, as we're going to describe this time at the moment. So a little bit of an introduction. Evelyn's already given a kind of great summary of the work that I do, and I work as an associate for CRIS Professional Development, and we're based in the Southwest. We work nationally. We work with lots of teams, groups, individuals, and we're very happy and very pleased to be partnering with Signature Recruitment on a number of these webinars. So just a bit of an introduction there to this topic today. So our topic of leading great hybrid teams. So as Evelyn said, the concept of virtual or remote teams, it's not necessarily new, but it's certainly become different for us all. It's certainly become much more standardized and affecting or involving more of us in hybrid ways, whether it's ourselves directly or our colleagues or a combination of those. It's simply become different since COVID-19, since we all went to work from home in the spring of last year. And whilst there have been lots of practices around flexible working, part-time working, blended working environments that we've been working in, we go and work here to do teamwork, we go and work here to do quiet work. There's been a huge step forward in the last 18 months in terms of normalizing those new ways of working. And alongside that, perhaps an expectation that when we are back in the workplace, maybe we are already now, it's not going to be quite the same as it was 18 months ago. Now, team leaders in this time of change and upheaval have faced many, many complex and challenging issues to deal with. And on top of those, rebuilding our teams and our organisations coming back from working from home, we're going to be faced with looking at how do we manage these complex hybrid working arrangements? What does that mean for us? What does that mean in terms of our management style, our techniques, our ways of working, excuse me, and we are going to require to broaden our different approaches to working. How does that work for us as a leader, as a manager of a team? How does it work for our team members? What's the same and what's different? What's going to change going forward from here? So we are seeing lots of different ways of working. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we go through this session today. And I'm not expecting or not anticipating that in 40 minutes we're going to answer everybody's questions and give you a clear route map, but hopefully that we will identify some food for thought for you, some things for you to take away and have a think about from this. So we're going to start just right at the very beginning. That sounds like I'm about to burst into song, but I promise you I'm not. But we're going to start just by considering, what do we mean by being in a team? What is a team? And there are 100 definitions out there about what being in a team really means. And here is just one to pick out. It's been around for a number of years now. And this is quite a simple way of describing what it means to be a team, as opposed to just a group of people working in the same space together. So what we tend to mean by a team is a small number of people with complementary skills. So people taking on different roles, bringing different expertise, taking on different responsibilities, working in different ways. And that small number of people with complementary skills are joined together. They're aligned around a common purpose. That might be a set of performance goals. It might be an objective to deliver. It might be an area to focus on. And interestingly, I think what makes the really big difference between that and just a group of people in the same space together is that they have an approach where they hold themselves mutually accountable. Mutually accountable for what? Mutually accountable for what I do, what you do, what we do together, and that being aligned with that common purpose or set of performance goals that we're working with. And that holding ourselves mutually accountable also opens the door for how we work together, how we talk to one another, how we evolve and develop our ways of working. It's a really nice definition about what being in a team is all about. And the note there at the bottom is just pointing out something we hadn't possibly spotted when we looked at this a couple of years ago, would be that within that definition, there's no mention about the physical location of the team. There's no mention there that the team has to physically be together in the same space. And yet lots of our practice and ways of working, there was kind of an assumption that we would be somehow co-located together. And of course, what we've seen in the last 18 months is that co-location can be virtual as well as physical, as well as actually in the same room together. But we can absolutely operate as a team, but be remote and distant from one another. So what does our hybrid team working actually mean? Well, it's emerging still, and I'm sure this is the same for you in your organizations, and this definition here, or these words here, may mean something to you in terms of your way of planning how this is going to be. As Evelyn said, some organizations have moved to almost entirely remote working, everybody now working from home. But the typical hybrid model is a combination of some of us working remote, some of us working in the office, and probably quite a number of us doing a mix or a blend of the two. So what we're seeing is practices, recommendations around returning to the office part of the time, about 50% of the time, about 2 or 3 days a week, something like this. Maybe we're returning in bubbles, so we're always with the same people, that we get a day a week. So this group does Mondays and Tuesdays, and this group does Wednesdays and Thursdays, something like that. But also we're seeing even more flexibility about choose the days that work for you. Choose the days that work for you and work for your work pattern. You've got flexibility over those days. An organization I'm working with, a client I'm working with, they're absolutely crystal clear. We expect you to be in 3 days a week. One of those must be a Monday or a Friday. And that's really to even out the numbers of people across the week. And you choose, you decide based on your workflow, which are the days that work for you. Other organizations I know are using much more of a kind of structured approach. What does that mean? What does that mean for us as leaders? What does it mean for our team members? What it means is I'm getting ready to go back into the office. That may be a massive positive for some people. It may be a point of concern, apprehension, anxiety, or worry for others. What it probably means is I'm with some of my colleagues and we're spaced out a bit more and we've got more room in which to work, but I'm not necessarily with all of my colleagues at the same time. So we may be working in the office and at home, and I may be in the office on the same day as colleagues, but not all of my colleagues. So I'm still connecting with people remotely as well as connecting with them physically in the same space. So it's going to be different, isn't it? It's going to be different. And some of those lessons that we've learned in the last 18 months or so are still going to stand us in good stead going forward. So let's just pause for a moment here and think about that experience of working from home. I don't know how it was for anybody else. For lots of people I work with, and certainly for myself, it was a very instant thing. Excuse me, last March, it was if you can work from home, go home. Go home, move everything you can to online, and go home and stay home until we let you know that you can come out again. And almost overnight, it seemed, actually, when you look back, it was probably over a course of a couple of weeks, we all just moved to home working, and we kind of did it in an instant. And for lots of us, there have been massive benefits from doing that. There have also undoubtedly been some challenges. So I'm going to invite you now for the next few minutes, just have a think about what's been good for you, what's worked for you or your colleagues, what have you noticed, what have been the benefits of working from home, what have been the challenges. And if you've got any thoughts or any feedback, then pop those into the Q&A. And in a few minutes, when we get on to the next slide, Evelyn will give me a bit of feedback in terms of the comments that you're sharing. But what have you noticed? And for lots of us, it's been a bit of a mixed bag. There's been some good stuff and some not so good stuff. So just pop any comments that you want to into the Q&A, and let's just share, because I think it's really interesting to hear from others about what you found to be the benefits and challenges from working from home. There has certainly been lots of research and information gathering around this, and I think we can kind of summarize some of those benefits and challenges on this slide here. And some of these may resonate with you, some of these may not resonate quite so well. But what have been those challenges? Well, people have reported back that they have some feelings of isolation, reduced access to their manager, to colleagues. It feels awkward to contact somebody because you have to make an appointment, whereas you might have had an opportunity conversation in the office. People feeling like they're missing out on information to do their job because there's a conversation going on over here that they are not involved in some way. There's certainly been reduced social contact, and that lots of us have recognised actually part of being in the workplace is about those face-to-face chats, that social time, and actually how much business we do in the corridor, making a cup of coffee, on the way to get some lunch. Actually, how much work business are we carrying out in those opportunity informal conversations compared to the formal meeting or appointment or scheduled time with somebody? For some people, unreliable technology or internet has been a real challenge. I'm sure some of the internet providers have been working overtime and extra to try and ensure we have robust connections at home, or even the practicalities of creating a suitable workspace. I've certainly had the experience in the last year or so of talking to people with lovely offices behind them, like as Evelyn and I have, but also people maybe sat in their bedroom or sat in an armchair because somebody else is at the dining room table, or just trying to find a quiet space because there are 2 or 3 of us working from home. Maybe there's some kids doing schooling as well. Seeking regular and helpful feedback. We have become very task orientated in this work from home. So we get a meeting, we go through the to-do list and we go away again. So that's seeking regular and helpful feedback. And that might be from colleagues, from customers, from each other, from our boss, whoever it might be. And for some people, those final 2, the unplugging from work, so the kind of opportunity to pack things up. When is the end of my working day? I would have had a commute or a journey home. Actually, it's just easy to carry on working because I don't have that commute time. Or even leaving my work out on the dining room table doesn't give me that clear boundary. I don't feel like I've closed up my work anymore. And for some of us, it's been the other end of the spectrum. It's been that self-discipline to get started and get working, because, you know, I've got chores around the house and other things to deal with. And actually my ability to create that boundary might impact in different ways. So I'm wondering, I'm going to pause there and just give Evelyn a chance to give me some feedback. I can see Q&A have come in. What kind of comments have come in from people about the challenges?
Thanks, Jo. I think the challenges you mentioned definitely resonates with a lot of our clients. So I think we had a couple of comments around, you know, you mentioned unplugging from work. So your comments around, like, you know, the challenges working remotely has meant there's less boundary of the working day, and especially as a mother who had to juggle lockdowns. And I think that is a feedback we had from a lot of our clients who have been kind of homeschooling in lockdown and still doing a full-time job as well. And then somebody else mentioned that basically always feeling that you are at work, because like you said, Jo, we don't leave the office and get on the tube, you know, switch off, and by the time you walk in and you're flat at home, you know, you're kind of in your own time. So I think that definitely has resonated with quite a few of our clients. Also challenges, and again, that is something that clients have mentioned to us, like, you know, when there are new starters, so like to onboard them. So for example, being aware of the work my team are doing and training with new staff has been harder when not in the office together. And I think that is quite a common, you know, kind of feedback as well, because it takes longer, because obviously, and you want to give your new starter the best start. Yeah. And I think it takes longer, it's more difficult. So I think that was also mentioned. Harder to work on team projects. I guess not being in the same room sometimes just makes it a bit quicker.
Absolutely, yeah, yes.
What else did we have? So, I think there's quite a few challenges. There's a few, somebody mentioned something about being able to work with international talents, which I guess we can come on to when we talk about maybe some of the benefits of working from home. And then also isolation, like team members have pivoted remarkably well and adapted as best as they could, despite some isolation, which has been mostly overcome after 18 months. But there is a sense the team members don't actually want to return to work on site at all because of the home life benefits and the cost saving from travel. So I guess that's the challenge employers, I guess, will have over the next few.
It is real practical challenges. Lovely, thank you. Some really good stuff in there. And I've just captured new starters and induction. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But lots and lots of rich examples there. So thank you very much for sharing that. And as I said, it's been a bit of a kind of two-edged sword. And for all of these challenges, there have also been some positives. So what we've seen coming through as the theme around the benefits is people do report an improved work-life balance, enjoying the flexibility in their working schedule, that they can start and finish at different times and ways that suit their lifestyle. So whether that be around schooling or around preferences for time of day for working, if you're an owl or a lark, we have had some fluidity in terms of our working schedule. And huge benefit has been that less stressful, less time-consuming and less costly commute to work. And somehow we've all gained a couple of hours a day because we're not having to go outside the house anymore. We're commuting across the landing or across the hallway to our workspace and back again. Lots of people are reporting healthier lifestyle options. Maybe that's about the combination of managing food and exercise and being able to be less distracted, get their head down and get on with some work, as opposed to that noise and social interactions and all the rest of it, which can sometimes be a distraction when you've got a big piece of work to get on. So more time concentrating and less time wasting, although some of us might see some of that as an investment in our social connections. So people do feel more productive from home, and that might be behind some of that resistance that we're sensing from people to come back to work, because I've got the commuting time, I've got the distractions, I've got the cost, I've got less flexibility. As part of that resistance, I'm able to be more productive at home. We have certainly taken across the workspace, some more than others, a massive step forward with the use of virtual technology, normalizing that we can do certain things that we never thought we could do via Zoom or Teams or anywhere else. And I just had on the list there, as I'm sat here in my summer clothes on a warm sunny day, the opportunity to perhaps wear informal or move to an informal dress code. I think I saw a report that Marks and Spencers are selling less gentlemen's suits, and they're actually reducing their stock. So there seems to be a big shift in our dress code going on. So there we go. So Evelyn, have you got anything there in terms of other benefits that have come through in the Q&A? Is anybody else sharing any of those that resonate in particular with them that they've noticed or experiencing? Anything there that's coming through?
Yeah, thank you, Jo. I think not so much. Maybe, so for example, the stop to work challenge they've always had is now working late, and it means that they can get on with things at home as the day goes on. So I think that definitely the time benefit has improved, because I guess you will have time to actually do stuff throughout the day rather than having to finish in the office and then coming home and doing whatever you had to do. So I think that definitely resonated with some of our clients. And then somebody mentioned, which I also thought was quite interesting, it enabled us to work with international talent, because I guess there's obviously no boundaries where somebody lives. And something we were not open to doing in the past. So I guess another benefit of that, because being in a candidate short market at the moment, having that opportunity is great, because I guess you have the best talent in the work in the market. And I think that was it. Let me just see any other comments on the benefits. I've actually lost 4 hours it is managing a multi-operational team. Has seen a lot of my working day spending time on team calls to coordinate the team. So my day job, so to speak, is done in my own time and at the weekend. So not a benefit from my perspective. So I think it's definitely
it's mixed.
50-50. And I think we always said that working from home is very, very personal, because it depends on the home setup that you have. And I think with the comments we had, it just really, I think, enforces that. Great for some people, not so great for others.
Absolutely, thank you very much for that. And it absolutely is a mixed bag in terms of our experiences of that. So whilst there have been some pluses, there will be some minuses, and it's been hard. I think just acknowledging it's been hard, it was unexpected, it's been difficult, and it's shifted across the whole of the 18 months. When we all went home 18 months ago, we thought it was going to be for 6 or 8 weeks and we'd all just come back again. But it's evolved over time and it's become a different thing. So now we're facing this challenge, this opportunity for hybrid working. What can we learn from our experience in the last 18 months that can help inform us? Well, what we have seen, and it's come out here again today, is that people prefer to work and they learn in different ways. So we all have our preferences, and whilst there's been good side, there's been downside and challenges too. That hybrid working can help us manage those improvements in our life balance, our work-life balance, that we all recognise now is really important in terms of our resilience and our well-being. And we need to now focus on some structure and some boundaries. That example that Evelyn was sharing there in terms of working time and what is my job role, and things take more time or maybe less time. That actually hybrid working does require us to trust ourselves as individuals, to trust one another in our team. Comes back to that mutual accountability point that we talked about at the very beginning in terms of a definition of a team. And it does make sense to retain some kind of remote or hybrid working in some way, whether that be parts of the team or team members being entirely remote, hence the access to a wider geographical pool of candidates, really important in this time, whether it's reduced business travel because we can do more things virtually, remotely than we thought we could do. For individuals and for organisations, it makes sense financially to include opportunities for people to work in hybrid ways going forward. So what are the issues for us as managers in this already complex and challenging world? Anybody here busy, got lots to do, and now you need to figure out a kind of new way of working in terms of how we work together? So what are the issues that we can think about? So issues for when we're working together in the same space, issues for when we're working together but in different spaces, and in our hybrid model, where we are working with some of our people in the same space and some of our people in a different space. The reality is, when we turn up to our physical workspace, we're going to be with some of our colleagues, not all of them, some of the time. So it's always top of the list, communication. How do we communicate one-to-one with our team members and with the whole team? How does that work? And how does it work in different ways when we're in different places with members of our team? How do we maintain motivation and energy? Ours and our teams, how do we be that team leader to promote that energy, motivation and focus on the goals that we are working towards? How do we pick up the cues as to how people really are, recognizing when they need support, when we are not physically in the same space as them, when our emotional intelligence and our cues, we're relying on what's on the screen, or we're doing it with people in two different ways at the same time. Maybe we're in a team meeting, some of our people are on screens, some of our people are physically in the room with us. So how do we think about these? How do we communicate and review work, tasks and priorities, identify what people are actually doing, and how do we as leaders offer and receive for ourselves productive and meaningful feedback when our communication may need to be really quite varied? And I think the final point on this list is really important. It's about being realistic. It's already come up there a little bit in the feedback. Some of this stuff takes more time. People are in different places at different times. And it's a real challenge for our aspirations for inclusivity. How do we include everybody and offer a range of different ways of working together, but still keep focused? Really challenging ourselves to think about that. So I'm sure you're already thinking about these points already. How do I do this? How do I practically manage a team when I'm with some of them some of the time, and when I'm not with all of them all of the time? How do I do that? What are the things I want to be thinking about? Well, our suggestions for you here in terms of how you can overcome the challenges. So we're looking here at kind of 5 key areas, and I'm going to go through these relatively quickly and then come on to a kind of summary at the end in terms of things that we would suggest that you focus on. How do we overcome the challenges? Well, thinking about our how do we maintain and develop our culture around how we work together? How do we ensure our communication is effective? How do we take care of our own professional development and those of our team members? How do we underpin all of that with an approach which is based on inclusion, trust and collective responsibility? And can we ensure, or can we utilize our learning mindset to learn from how we do this? So some suggestions and thoughts for you. In terms of maintaining our team and company culture, some of the things that you can do, you might want to ask your team to pinpoint what they've found useful in the last 18 months or so. What have been the aspects of the culture or the activities in the ways you've been working that they found helpful? What do they want more of? Or maybe what was missing for them and that they want more of? So how can you incorporate that into your hybrid meetings? There's something practical in terms of team meetings, whether they're virtual or otherwise blended, some in the room, some not. Invite everybody to make a contribution, and invite everybody to make a contribution based on what's gone well. So why don't we celebrate our successes? We used to do this quite regularly, almost instinctively within our teams. Let's make sure we're doing this again. This will all give us that positive, strength-based, appreciative, inquiry-based approach to what's working well as the opportunity to learn lessons and adapt what we're doing for the future. So making sure we keep that good team culture, team working together going on. Effective communications. I know this is quite a busy slide here. I'll give you a moment to have a read of these. So explore with your team what communication method works best for what type of communication. We are overloaded with how we can communicate, whether it's a WhatsApp social group, whether it's a Zoom meeting, whether it's many channels, whether it's old traditional email, or even the other day I had a telephone call with somebody because we thought we'd do something different just to try that out. So what method works best for what kind of communication? Doesn't mean we get too rigid or structured with it, but thinking about what's the conversation, what's the communication we're having, how do we do that most appropriately, most effectively, and how do we make sure that things don't get missed between us? In our meetings, as I've said, being mindful around how those get scheduled. Lots of us have ended up with really full schedules of work. Think about how that works. Is it a day when we're all in the office? Is it a day when some people are remote? Let's not overschedule ourselves with meetings. Let's give people some before time and after time those meetings. Let's make sure that we involve everybody in those meetings. And the point there I'm going to jump to, the downtime, the fluidity regarding our working hours, because this has come up, is actually giving people permission to say, I'm finishing at 4 today, or I'm starting at 11 or 10, and encouraging a culture of respecting that so that people can be clear when they're available or when they're not. Lots of us will now be working those kind of school hours, and maybe there's a block of time in the middle of the day where it's less easy for us to be available, but we pick up again in the evening. That's been a model we've been working with for years, and making that happen. But there's something there about not feeling obliged or under beholden to be available all of the time. And it's also remembering to make space for some of that social contact, that social communication. It's okay if people have a WhatsApp group and send some jokes and have a bit of banter, as long as that's appropriate in terms of the level of humour that's there. Because what we have missed is that social communication, that reaching out and check-in time in terms of the work we do together. We've all been learning so much in the last 18 months. And as leaders, we can encourage time for ourselves and for team members to reflect on what works for them and what doesn't. We can look at performance objectives in light of the new working arrangements, perhaps agree some shared learning objectives for the whole team. We're going to work out how we do this together. And we need to recognise successes. So some of the points we talked about earlier, recognising successes, that helps to drive that positive culture. So calling those out too, that was part of our own professional development. So I think the next 2 slides really kind of underpin this whole approach. Working in a hybrid way, just like working from home, relies on trust, it relies on relationships, it relies on team members working together, and it relies on two-way communication. So collaboration is absolutely key for teams. Making sure that we give every opportunity to everybody in our team, whether they're physically present or remote, that we can't always offer the same level of attention, but an equivalent level of attention. I've certainly been on calls with some people in the room, some on the screen. Sometimes your attention is all on the screen. Sometimes your attention is on everybody in the room, and we forget the people on the screen. Actually, how do we make sure that we are being even-handed in where we put our attention, where we give people opportunities to speak, opportunities to contribute, opportunities to shine in terms of the work we do together. That element of shared goals and purpose for our team comes back to that definition of team and how we work together. And encouraging open communication and feedback with the leader. Again, it's a cultural point here around tell me what's working and what's not, because if I don't know, I can't do anything about it, but actually being open to that. If we don't do that, it still happens, the communication still happens, but it will go underground. So if people are not sure, uncomfortable, not feeling safe, not feeling in an easy place, they're going to chatter amongst themselves. Actually, we want to create that open communication for feedback with the manager. How's it going? What's going well? What can we do to change things? And all of that requires engaging our learning mindset. We won't get it right all the time. The term unprecedented times has been used and overused in the last year, but we don't quite know how it's going to work out. We will try some stuff and it will work. We will try some stuff and learn it doesn't work. So if we can engage our learning mindset, try some things out, learn from those, build on what works and what doesn't, then that's going to be super helpful. Evelyn, I know I'm getting close to time. I've just got a couple more slides to go. Is that okay?
That's all right. I know we had a little bit of a feedback session halfway through, which, you know, obviously appreciated this adding on to that. But no, that's fine. We're still good for time. We said about 40, 45 minutes.
Okay. All right. Good. So I think the key piece for me in terms of what you can do as a team leader is to have conversations with your team, encourage that open conversation about what they have and what they need, what's going to support them, remembering that different people will be in different places because of their own preferences, because of their own learning style, because of their own remote working arrangements or hybrid working arrangements, however that's working for them. So thinking about what do I have and what do I need, and where are the gaps in those that you as a team leader can do something about. So I'm going to post here on this kind of scale of 1 to 10, just 6 simple questions, and invite you maybe to think about these for yourself, for a team member. How might the conversation go if you were to sit down with a team member and start to talk to them about what do they have and what do they need with regard to these questions? So do they have clear objectives and understand their priorities? Do they need that? Do they need anything more to help them get that there? Do they know what's expected of them to demonstrate progress in their work? Do they have that? Do they need it? Do they have clarity about their working hours, their location, and expectations regarding breaks? And you could add to that start and finish times. Do they have that clear understanding about what's expected of them? Do they need it? Do they need further work on that? Do the two of you need to have a conversation to clarify that for them? Are they aware of their own social needs? Are they that kind of person who needs lots of social engagement, or are they actually somebody who would prefer to spend 4.5 days a week on their own in a darkened room with the curtains closed working? Is that what they need in terms of their social requirements? Or do they need to interact regularly, and are they getting what they need? Are they able to manage their personal time? We're only the employer, but actually this whole well-being and resilience agenda is super important in supporting people at this time. Are they able to manage their personal time? Is there anything that you as the employer, you as their manager, can help them to find an easier way of managing their personal time? And are you as their manager meeting their needs for support and communication? If you can engage a conversation with your people, maybe around those 6 questions, variations of those, maybe even just 2 or 3 of those questions, where you can be talking about what do they have and what do they need, then you're going to be able to understand that and facilitate meeting that needs, closing that gap for them. That's going to be a much more productive conversation. It's going to make the whole going forward from here an awful lot easier to navigate. So what's the benefits of all of this? Why are we investing in all of this? Well, the biggest benefit has been named already very early on by you. The biggest benefit of this is accessing talent, accessing the talent we already have in our teams. It's also about attracting new talent. It's about making sure, because there is an awful lot of recruitment going on out there at the moment. There is also thinking about what are those things that employees are looking for? What's going to make them leave their current employer or move to a new employer? Well, it's going to be the demonstration of those values that we were talking about earlier: inclusivity, trust, collaboration, flexibility, feeling part of a team, able to make it work for me in my life and also in my professional life. So balancing that personal life and professional life. Those are going to be the key things. They're going to be signposting people towards staying where they're working or working somewhere else. Okay. I am going to pause there and move on to questions. Any questions coming through from there? Just letting Evelyn, if you want to sift these and pass these on, then that would be great if there's anything coming through.
Thanks, Jo. I just had a slight technical issue. My laptop crashed and I was thrown out of the webinar, so mini panic here, but I think I'm back in. So let me just see if I can load the questions again.
Okay. See if I can see them as well. Okay. I did say I would just come back to the issue of new starters and induction. So let me just chunter about that for a moment. And I think lots of people have started new jobs in lockdown, and there is something about that socialization of bringing on board new starters. So both the nervousness of the new starter, the inductee coming in, but also I think we've all learned that there's so much that people absorb about an organization by being physically in the workspace and with colleagues. The way we do things around here is what we pick up by being in the workspace. So I'm working with a client at the moment, and they had a social get together, their first proper one for a long time, a few evenings ago. And it was great because they had 8 or 9 new starters, and it was the first time they'd kind of all been together in an appropriately social distance, social environment. I think it was an evening quiz that they did, but really kind of got people on board. So what are the other ways in which we can do that? But it's a real challenge, both for new starters and for teams, to welcome on board somebody who just kind of joins maybe as a screen part of the time in their working world. So Evelyn, welcome back. Just checking if that's given you a few moments just to see if there's anything else that's there.
Thank you, Jo. Very professional there. Thank you. Yes, we did have a couple of questions come through. Somebody asked, I have experienced a situation where some of the team members were in the office and some were not. The ones in the office formed a subgroup, and then this was a challenge for communication, as this makes management tricky, which I guess some of it comes back to communication. But yeah, like, what would your advice be, Jo?
Yeah, sure. And I think my immediate reaction is, I think that's a challenge, and it's a risk with bubbles, is that we end up with the same people all the time, and we might end up with these kind of cliques or subgroups. So finding ways of the hybrid working and part in the office and part not, kind of mixing it up a bit, I think would be a really good answer. But it is a real danger with the kind of bubbles, because we like the people who are like us, and we like the people who are sat next to us. It's one of our kind of natural biases, and we always talk about the others who aren't in the room. So there's a real danger there with that. So trying to mix up where you can, and be just very mindful about bubbles. I think they're quite high risk.
Yeah, thank you. We have another question, and I think this is probably something a lot of our clients mention to us when we speak to them as well. I'm finding it hard balancing the need for face-to-face contact due to the nature of the roles but staff who now feel they have the right to work from home. Yeah. And I know you and I spoke about this in preparation of this webinar, because we thought that this might be a question that might actually come up, because it's quite common at the moment, isn't it?
It is. And there's a real risk of a kind of 2-tier system emerging. That was part of our conversation, of those that are at home and those that are in the office. Finding it hard balancing the need for face-to-face contact. Yeah. And contract, I don't want to get too employment law-y about it. Employment contracts still remain working in the office, and so working from home is not a right, and I can see it's there in the question in inverted commas. It is a practice, but it brings with it a whole load of other issues around health and safety and legal stuff and all the rest of it, in terms of contracts. So I think encouraging people to come back in, and that it's giving them a reason and a purpose to come back in. So whether it is a team day to come back into the office, or a company update, or a social of some kind to come into the office. And there is something about being kind of firm but fair about the expectation is you're in the office on so many occasions, and actually meeting one-to-one with your line manager is not an unreasonable request. Not doing it every day, not doing it necessarily every week, but it's not an unreasonable request to be able to come in and do that. I hope that's helped a little bit. Yeah, it is a challenging one.
Oh, thank you, Jo, because we had another somebody else mentioning a very similar questions, like how to address/manage expectation when a personal preference, regarding returning to the office aren't aligned with what the organization expects. So thank you very much for that.
Lots of organizations, just to add to that, lots of organizations have done lots of consultation with employees. So whether it be through surveys, through focus groups, through conversations, it's not something that you just communicate once. It needs a really good communications plan about how we're going to make this work. This is our thinking, what's going to work for you. These are our expectations. But it does need a firmish but fair message about, we're expecting you back in the office at least some of the time.
Yeah. And we have another question, Jo. I'm not quite sure if this may be something that you've experienced as well. So any tips on how to manage team calls in an open plan office. Like, how do you indicate that you're actually not available to talk? Because people will see you at your desk, but won't know you're actually engaged virtually and are not free. Because I guess that's something that's coming up more and more now, isn't it? Because before you're on your phone, it was, you could see if you're on the telephone physically, so you're not available. But I don't know, I mean, how does it work in, like at CRISP? Like, are you guys back in the office to some extent? And is there a way where you kind of communicate? You know what I mean? I can't really speak because I'm actually in a meeting online.
Yeah. I think it's consult with a team for their ideas. I mean, you could do something as trite as, you know, you've got a red baseball cap. It's very American kind of thing. You know, I'm wearing a baseball cap when I'm on a call or when I'm not. I mean, I'm not particularly a fan of those ideas, as you can see, but some way of kind of signaling. But there is an assumption people are sat at the desk, and there always was before lockdown. If you're sat at your desk, I can interrupt you was kind of a thing, even if you were actually deep into work stuff. And open plan offices, and I know some of the headphones are pretty good at distilling the noise and the background noise. I've certainly been on a call with somebody in an open plan office, and it's awful because you've got all this interruption going on in the back area for the other person on the call. So maybe finding a quieter space, if it's possible to do, that would be beneficial. But certainly some way of signaling, but agree it in your team as to how you can do that.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's definitely something more and more of us are kind of trying to figure out like a day-to-day operational way of kind of dealing with that. So thank you. And I know I don't want to go too much into the HR side of it, but somebody mentioned, you know, we briefly spoke about contractually, you know, what is it that you're actually allowed to do? Somebody mentioned if, you know, we are actually changing employment contracts to recognize flexible working. Is this the right thing to do?
Okay, so there are different points of view on this. I've been tracking and following some of the employment law advice going on this, and it's the usual employment law response of it depends. Okay, so home working contracts are entirely different to working in an office contract. There are a number of elements in there. There are a number of new responsibilities, including if the person comes to work, then they would claim their travel to work costs. There's health and safety issues about the workplace, all kinds of things. The question is talking about flexible working. Certainly a light change to a contract which says your base of work remains the office. However, there may be opportunities by arrangement or by agreement with your manager where you can work from home. Those kind of light changes I think are perfectly okay to do and actually reflect common practice, but it's the moving of the base of work that I think needs very careful consideration as to whether that's appropriate or not, because again, if in the future if you want to bring it back to office working, that is another contractual change. But it's employment lawyers written all over it. That is not employment law advice. Go and seek advice appropriate for your circumstances, but certainly working hours and including flexibility, a light change to that should probably be okay in most circumstances.
Great.
Is that caveated enough?
I know, because I know you mentioned, you know, obviously from an HR point of view, I guess most of our clients will have HR to go back to as well. But no, thank you so much. I think that has been really helpful, Jo. Are there any other questions for Jo? I'm mindful of time, and obviously it's gone 1:45. Is there anything else that anybody would like to have answered? I think we have one final question, Jo, if you have time for it.
Yep.
Just really going forward, like, what do you think would be specific issues as we increasingly go hybrid? So, for example, some obviously in the office, I'm working from home rather than all of us working remotely. So like mixed meetings, obviously, is not just technical challenges, but also the noise of so many people on Zoom. Is there any quick fixes or anything you can think of for that?
I think that technology and getting the technology right has got to be key. And I've sat in some brilliant meetings physically and remotely, and I've sat in some car crash meetings, I'm sure everybody else has, because it just hasn't worked. So I think technology is really key. And I think that point we lightly touched on just now is being mindful of that risk of a two-tier system emerging. There's already, you know, prior to COVID, we had this thing called presenteeism. Okay, so in some organizations, I'm here for longer, I'm here next to the boss, I'm here putting my hand up, I'm going to get promoted, I'm going to be more successful. There is a risk that people in certain groups aligned with protected characteristics. So there is a suggestion that people who have more commitment at home, so mothers, people with caring responsibilities, may end up wanting to work from home more. Those with less responsibilities, and being quite stereotyped here, okay, may find it easier to be in the office. And there is a risk of that two-tier system becoming a real thing. So I think making sure that inclusivity, that trust, and that balance, that Goldilocks porridge moment, if you like, that perfect balance of, you know, kind of anything goes as long as it's within the framework kind of thing. So we can flex with how we're working. I think those are things to watch very, very carefully. Again, the employment lawyers are rubbing their hands with glee with some of this stuff coming up, the contentious employment lawyers, that is, in terms of what might happen. We just don't know. We just don't know. But being fair and even-handed in how we give people opportunities to shine, to do their best work, to be part of what we're doing, how we include everybody, give that sense of belonging and inclusivity, whilst also managing preferences. I think that's going to be a really big area.
Oh, thank you so much, Jo. So I wanted to say a big thank you, Jo, for your time today. I hope everyone has come away with a couple of really useful tips. Speaking for myself, I think the questions you have posed, you know, the Excel sheet, like what do we have, what do we need, is definitely something I might ask you to send over to myself, and it'd be something I'll be using with my team here. But really, for anybody else who has joined, feel free to reach out to Victoria in the Bristol office or myself in the London office if you would like any further information on today's webinar. But yeah, thanks again, Jo, and thank you very much to everybody who has joined us this morning. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for your contribution. Bye, everybody. Thank you.